We're live with Studio Bldg, and this is Janice Fiamengo from the University of Ottawa. Welcome, Janice, in Kingston, Ontario. Steve. So Janice is here in Kingston, Ontario, to give a lecture tonight at the Queen's University, and the topic of your lecture is?
It's called "What's Equality Got to Do with It? Men's Issues on Campus and Feminism's Double Standards."
Okay. Now, this is sponsored by the little technical glitch there. The headphones didn't get in there properly that they found. Okay, well, we'll just have to leave that audio off. So, Janice, this is sponsored by the Cafe and is a newly formed group on Queens, the Men's Issues Awareness Society. This is stirred up a little bit of controversy.
It sounds like it, yes. Last week, a group opposed to the Men's Issues Awareness Society tried to have the group de-ratified so that they wouldn't have been able to rent event spaces and have speakers come in, and fortunately the AMS chose to allow the group to go forward, so we're hoping it will flourish.
Yeah, I was at that de-ratification meeting, and it was a good hour plus of debate. Some of the students on campus were very passionate about getting the group de-ratified, and I think specifically they were concerned about your talk, which is again, the topic is about what's equality got to do with feminism.
What's equality got to do with it? Men's issues on campus and feminism's double standards. And so I think the fact that a debate of the nature as you describe it, so passionate, so heated, full of dire warnings, about the effects of such a group, proves the double standards that exist. Clearly, there are all sorts of groups on Queen's University. Some of them have agendas that I don't agree with. There's a Marxist group, that presumably seeks to transform the world according to Marxist principles. I find that, disturbing and offensive and everything else. Marxism, wherever it's been tried, has led to untold human misery and millions of deaths. But I wouldn't oppose the right of any students to have a group in which they discuss Marxist ideas and in which they invite Marxist speakers, or anything like that. I don't believe that ideas can be outlawed, or that certain ideas are so sacrosanct that one isn't allowed to speak against them. That's the basis of a free society, and so clearly I think that any group that isn't calling for violence, which the Men's Issues Society certainly is not. We're not interested in oppressing anyone or harming anyone. We're just interested in providing a forum for men to talk about their experiences.
Well, Janice, you're not accustomed to all this attention. You're getting a lot of interview requests now since beginning this openly speaking against or criticizing women's studies.
Yeah. Since
around the time of Warren Farrell's protest at the end of 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all new for me, and I'm sure I know there was a criticism of me at the AMS meeting, saying that I'm not an expert in this area, and therefore I have no right to speak about it. Really, the reason I am speaking is that it seems to me right now it's especially important for women as well as men to speak about the legitimacy of men having groups where they can discuss their experiences and their challenges. And so even though I agree, actually, I'm not an expert in anything really except the climate on university campuses. I think I have lived that from the inside. Yeah. I've been in the belly of the beast for a long time, so I can certainly speak about that. On all the other things, statistics and all those kinds of things, I just know what a lot of people know from reading and observation and kind of a common sense commitment to equality. So I don't come forward as an expert, but I come forward as a friend of the men's rights movement and to advocate for freedom of expression on campus.
Now, speaking of campuses, Ottawa U's had quite a controversy with that Facebook comment thing.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I forget the name of the young woman who's the president of the student union.
Mm-hmm. I think it's
Anne-Marie Roy?
Roy, probably.
Roy?
Yeah,
Roy.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Now,
I mean, it was a terrible thing that those students said. I thought it was quite obscene.
I understand it was a private message that got sent to her, and
yeah, that's what I understand, and I might not know all of the details. I don't really understand how a private message ended up being public and that sort of thing, but it seems to me that if it was indeed intended to be a private message, although clearly it was morally wrong, and I don't like the thought of people writing such things about other people, a young man writing such things about a young woman. It's very disturbing, but it doesn't. I don't think it is proof of any kind of widespread.
Well, they're talking rape culture, and again, this term's been around now probably 7 or 8 years or something like this.
Maybe even longer. I think maybe
that.
It was coined in the early 1990s from some of my readings.
Long ago.
Yeah,
okay.
although I didn't encounter it until fairly recently. But yeah, I mean, I
Are you going to be touching on this topic tonight?
I'm going to focus on it extensively tomorrow night when I speak at the University of Ottawa.
Two different lectures.
Yeah, the two talks are different, because I originally was going to do the same talk, and then I thought, well, maybe not everyone at Queen's is all that interested in the details of what's going on at the University of Ottawa, so I would be willing to speak about it afterwards in question, but I just touch on it very, very lightly.
Okay.
But it does seem to me
rape culture is the focus of your University of Ottawa talk.
Yeah, that's the real focus there, yeah, whereas my focus tonight is more generally on the kinds of double standards that operate when feminists attempt to suppress non-feminist speakers and non-feminist arguments. Yeah.
There was a woman, I think it was a commenter at University of Ottawa, who considers you to be truly dangerous. Yeah, and so they were advocating some kind of a protest, I think, either at the University of Ottawa or at Queen's, and there was some request for police presence. Like some feminists consider you dangerous.
Well,
have you had that feedback before?
Well, that's the
or what do you think they mean by dangerous?
Well, they mean that words are dangerous because they create a climate of opinion, which to some extent, of course, they do, but they mean that that I create by speaking against some of feminism's claims and statistics, that I create a climate in which it's okay to be violent towards women and to rape them and not consider their
So they don't
suffering.
Consider you dangerous in terms of maybe being a threat to women's studies or a threat to feminism.
Well, I think generally in that way, but that's not what they would say specifically. I mean, I think that's what it really is. Feminism wants a hegemony on campus and in other areas of society. It wants to be the only voice. Now, most of your
speaking out has been critical of feminism, not specifically about the rape culture, which is, I guess, one small part of feminist discourse.
I see that as a tool that feminists use to silence and shame their opponents, to talk about a rape culture. I can't believe they actually believe that we live in a rape culture. We don't. Rape is considered a serious crime, and there's a great deal of sympathy for victims of rape. So it's nonsense to claim that, but for them it's an ideological tool to silence anyone who wants to speak against their statistics and their claims. And so I'm a threat. Yes, I'm a threat in the sense that I am raising objections to their arguments and to their propositions. And but they would say that I'm a much larger threat, because they would say that I actually somehow encourage violence against women, which of course I don't. I abhor it, as all decent people do.
Well, I just heard a few minutes ago that there was an assault at Queen's on campus, and they're not really sure whether it has anything to do with this talk or not. But the woman who was assaulted is saying that that this sort of group, the Men's Issue Awareness Society, is creating that kind of climate and may have triggered this assault, but there's no evidence of that from the police at this point that we've heard.
Yeah, well, climates don't assault people.
No.
Criminals assault
criminals
people.
Do, yeah, of course.
And of course, one condemns violence, and as far as I know, all of the major proponents of men's rights in Canada are peaceful and absolutely condemn violence against women or violence against anyone. That can't be said for feminists. Feminists actually often advocate violence against men.
Yes, there's the hashtag kill all men that's floating around.
Yeah, that's just recently that many feminists twittered these statements, and there you can find all sorts of websites talking about killing men. There's a long-standing tradition in feminist discourse of major feminist theoreticians and icons who advocated killing men, and yet somehow that's okay. That's another one of the double standards. They get a pass on that, on their violence, on their abusive rhetoric, but
the kill all men one included, I guess, suggestions that men should be culled to 25% of the population or less.
Yes. Well, Mary Daly thought that they could be brought down to 10%.
10%.
Yeah. So,
and she was a prominent feminist.
Oh, she was a major figure at Boston University, I believe. And
now, Janice, before we go off that topic, you began life as a feminist, a fairly committed feminist.
Oh yeah, I was a radical. Yeah.
A radical feminist. And what changed your mind?
Really, I think the major thing was when I got my first real position at the University of Saskatchewan, seeing the way that affirmative action, they didn't call it that, they called it equity hiring, but the way that it discriminated against men. And I thought, this is not equality, this is just revenge or something bizarre.
When was this?
This would have been in the late 90s. I was hired there in 1999.
Okay.
Yeah, and it turned me off. I thought it was morally corrupt. And after that, I had already begun sort of questioning a lot of the, what seemed to me the exaggerated claims of feminism about women's victimization. But after that, I stopped really calling myself a feminist and began to question everything about.
And 10 years later, you're speaking out quite and getting a lot of attention.
Yeah,
a little media storm around you right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like it's maybe a bit much, because I don't really think that I'm important enough to get so much attention. But somebody like Karen Strawn, who really has a major impact, she deserves it. But I'm happy to be able to do my part in drawing attention to men's issues.
Well, you're certainly having a significant impact on campuses
right now. I'm having my 15 minutes of fame, that's for sure.
You had quite a few interviews in the past day, and a couple more tomorrow?
Yeah, a couple. I had one today, I've got one tomorrow, I've got one on Monday, and a couple other requests.
All around this same topic.
Yeah, all around this topic. Right. Yeah, so I hope it means that maybe the tide is turning, maybe it has been turning for the last few years, that people are starting to recognize that some of the kinds of arguments that feminists are making, both on campus and in our society generally, are and the policies that they've had a hand in putting into place are actually harming to men, and that the pendulum of opinion has swung too far in women's favor, and that men and women need to work together to build a just society. And when men aren't doing well, then ultimately women and children don't do well either. And so women have a stake in making sure that that men's harms are addressed as well.
If you could summarize tonight's talk, I'll just put this out to you in one sentence or in 20 seconds. Could you?
It's about double standards. I'm going to look at some examples of double standards in the kinds of things that feminists say about their position, about men, and the way in which they use certain rhetorical tactics.
Do you have a quick example of a double standard?
A quick example would probably be there's a case of a professor of history a couple of years ago who ended up losing his job because some TAs complained about his use of language, and it's simply unimaginable that if it had been the other way around, if he had been a feminist professor, and some male students had complained about the feminist professor's use of language,
there would be no consequence.
It would not have been treated in the way that he was treated. And he ended up quitting his position because he was so humiliated by the whole ruckus.
And what about tomorrow night's talk?
Tomorrow night's talk is going to really look at the discourse around rape culture. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the reality of rape on campus actually is, and at the kinds of nonsensical things that have been said about the University of Ottawa, and how we need to have all sorts of recommendations and restrictions on speech in order to accommodate the need for women to feel safe. So I'm just going to be mainly
It's funny
looking at
because,
that.
not funny, but just this morning I was listening to a talk at A Voice for Men, and there was I think a law professor, somebody from a government organization in the U.S., and they were talking about this claim that 1 in 4 women would be assaulted on campus.
Yes,
and the woman made the point that Detroit, the most dangerous city in the U.S., all violent crimes, including assault, robberies, every violent crime together has a rate of 2%, and the rape rate in Detroit is 0.037%.
Yeah, well, there you go.
In the most dangerous city in the U.S., which is probably the most dangerous city in North America.
Yeah. Well,
so there's a disconnect
statistic,
there with that statistic.
That statistic is a made-up statistic. Christina Hoff Sommers, way back in, I think, 1993, in Who Stole Feminism, showed how the methodology of arriving at that statistic was faulty, and yet feminist organizations continue to use it because it's politically useful. It's absolutely
there was one article I read that put the rate at 60%. I think they were referring to a university on the east coast of Canada.
What can you do with
60%?
crazed claims like that?
Yeah.
There's a study by a man named Chad Harmon of 3 universities in Pittsburgh, and he found there, just going on the number of rapes reported to police on campus. Of course, feminists would say that 90% of rapes are never reported, but he went on the rapes reported, and he worked out that a woman on those campuses would have something like a 1 in 1,877 chance of being raped, and then even if you added in the 90%, you'd only have a 1 in 188 chance of being raped. I mean, it's just, these are nonsensical.
It's significantly different than the claims. So there's a bit of alarmism going on there. Not that, of course, rape is a very serious crime.
Absolutely.
No one is
even one
suggesting
is too
that,
many, as people say. I mean, I agree that it's a terrible thing, but criminals rape. The idea that feminists want to spread is that rape is somehow paradigmatic of male sexuality, that all men, even if they don't actually rape, are in some way rapists in their hearts, and that all men need to bear the shame and the collective guilt of rape. That's just simply not true. But it's politically useful for feminists, and it's, I think, very damaging to men's self-esteem and their position in the world.
Well, Janice, I'm sure you've got a lot to prepare for tonight. So thank you very much for having a quick interview before your talk.
Thank you.
And good luck tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. You can end the broadcast.
We had a question.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the question? Go ahead.
Okay. In men, it is natural, but gender identity in women is a social creation. And that's the question. What do you think about gender being a social construction?
Yes, well, that's a favorite topic of feminism, that most feminists would say that all gender, both male and female, or both masculine and feminine, is a social construct. Now, I am not a scientist, a biologist, or anything like that. I would say that, yes, there's an element of social construction in how we express our maleness or our femaleness, for sure, because you can see over the ages that there have been differences in the way men express masculinity and women express femininity. But I think there are also ways in which men and women simply are different and complementary.
It's a nature nurture.
There is,
kind of,
so there. The point is that if you believe it's all nurture, then you believe everything can be redone. The whole society can be made over just because you decide you're going to make it over that way. So of course that's very attractive to
Do feminists actually subscribe to it's fully fully nurture, it's
most of them, I would
fully
say.
constructed?
Yeah, certainly all of the major feminists.
That gender has no genetic component to it.
Well, I think they would say yes, there's some biological genetic
put
basis.
80% say on to social construction.
But that we don't know what it is, and that the vast majority is social, is culturally constructed, and therefore can be remade.
Okay.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fit with the science, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, a lot of harm has been done by some researchers and even surgeons, for instance, who believe that sex reassignment can be done. There's a case of a doctor named Money who advised parents to change their child's sex because something happened to the child at a very young age. His penis was damaged, and so he said, let's just make this child into a girl.
They just out of the blue decided to do this?
Yeah, and and it was a kind of it was going to be a validation of his theory that gender is socially constructed, and this
so they
poor young
experimented
man,
on this.
They experimented on this baby, and he was raised as a girl. He was one of a twin. He was raised as a girl. He was, and this doctor reported the success with which he had been turned into a
Who was
girl.
the doctor? Money.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay.
Money.
Okay.
And in the end, the young man ultimately found out what had happened to him. And he tried to then live his life as a man. He'd always felt that he was a man, and in the end, he committed suicide.
Oh, that's that's very tragic.
It's an example of the danger of that kind of theory.
Yeah. Now, this theory also, I mean, fully constructivism would suggest then that a gay person could be turned into a straight person and vice versa, just by social. Training.
Somehow, and somehow it doesn't
with,
usually get applied to.
Yeah, doesn't fit with the science.
No.
Yeah. Do we have other questions there, fellas?
No, that's it.
No. Okay, so I think we probably should wrap up this broadcast.